Look around you right now. Whatever room you're sitting in, whatever screen you're reading this on, whatever clothes you're wearing, whatever language you're thinking in, all of it exists because one species on this planet figured out how to do something no other species could. Not just survive, not just adapt, but completely rewrite the rules of the game. Humans. We're not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most resilient. We can't fly. We can't breathe underwater. We don't have venom, claws, armor, or echolocation. A naked human dropped alone in the wilderness is basically a walking buffet for everything with teeth. And yet here we are, 8 billion of us, living on every continent, reshaping landscapes, building cities visible from space, while the species that could kill us with one bite are either in zoos, on the brink of extinction, or avoiding us entirely. The question is simple, but the answer is layered. Why us? Why humans? What exactly makes us the most intelligent? And why didn't any other animal develop what we have? Let's break it down properly. No philosophy, no spiritual nonsense. Pure biology, evolution, and some uncomfortable truths. Before we declare humans the winners, we need to ask a harder question first. What even is intelligence? Most people confuse intelligence with knowledge. They're not the same thing. Knowledge is information you've collected. Intelligence is what you do with that information, especially in unfamiliar situations. A dolphin knows how to hunt in the ocean. A crow knows how to use a stick to extract insects. A chimpanzee knows which plants cure stomach pain. These are all impressive, but they're specific. They're solutions to problems that have existed for millions of years. Human intelligence is different. It doesn't just solve existing problems. It creates brand new problems and then solves those too. It doesn't just learn from direct experience. It learns from imagined scenarios that have never happened. It doesn't just communicate danger or food. It communicates abstract concepts like justice, ownership, time, mathematics, and meaning. An octopus is incredibly smart, can open jars from the inside. It can recognize individual humans who've been rude to it weeks earlier. It can change color and texture to perfectly match its surroundings. These are not small achievements. But no octopus has ever sat down and wondered why it exists. No octopus has drawn a map of the ocean floor and distributed it to other octopuses. No octopus has built a structure that its great-grandchildren would inherit. Why? What's the actual biological difference? The first instinct people have is to point at brain size. And yes, humans have big brains. About 1,300 to 1,400 grams on average. But here's where it gets complicated. Elephants have brains weighing over 4,500 grams. Sperm whales have brains that can reach 8,000 grams. If brain size alone determined intelligence, we'd be taking orders from whales right now. Then there's brain-to-body ratio. This is closer to the truth. Humans have an exceptionally large brain relative to body size. Our brain makes up about 2% of body weight but consumes 20% of our energy. That's absurdly disproportionate. But even here we don't hold the record. Shrews have larger brain-to-body ratios than we do. Some birds beat us on this metric too. So what actually matters? Two things. Absolute number of neurons, specifically in the cerebral cortex, and how densely those neurons are packed. Humans have roughly 86 billion neurons total. About 16 billion of them are in the cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer responsible for reasoning, language, and conscious thought. This is more cortical neurons than any other species on Earth. Elephants have bigger brains but fewer cortical neurons. Whales have massive brains but their neurons are spaced further apart. Neuron density matters as much as neuron count. But even this isn't the full picture. The real magic isn't how many neurons we have. It's how they're connected. Every mammal has a prefrontal cortex. It's the front part of the brain, right behind your forehead. In most animals, it's small and handles basic functions like attention and planning simple actions. In humans, it exploded. The human prefrontal cortex is disproportionately massive. It takes up roughly 1/3 of our entire cerebral cortex. In chimpanzees, it's about 11%. In dogs, even less. This region is responsible for everything that makes human intelligence unique. abstract thinking, long-term planning, impulse control, moral reasoning, personality expression, and most importantly, the ability to simulate the future. Other animals live almost entirely in the present. A dog doesn't lie awake at night worried about what happens after death. A cat doesn't save part of its meal for next week. A deer doesn't wonder what it wants to do with its life 5 years from now. They react. They respond to immediate stimuli. Hunger, threat, reproduction. Their decision-making is bound to the now. Humans broke out of that cage. The prefrontal cortex allows us to mentally time travel. We can imagine scenarios that don't exist. We can run simulations in our heads. If I do X, then Y might happen, which means I should probably do Z instead. This mental modeling is not just rare. It's essentially unique to us at this level of complexity. Chimpanzees can plan a few minutes ahead. Some birds can cache food and remember hundreds of locations. But no animal builds a retirement plan. No animal trains for a marathon that happens next year. No animal writes a will. These behaviors require projecting yourself into a distant future that doesn't exist yet, and then acting today in service of that imagined future. If the prefrontal cortex is the engine of human intelligence, language is the fuel injection system. And I'm not talking about communication. Bees communicate. Whales communicate. Prairie dogs have alarm calls that specify whether a predator is a coyote, a hawk, or a human, and even describe the color of the human's clothing. This is complex stuff. But human language is fundamentally different in one specific way. It's compositional. It's recursive. It can generate infinite new meanings from finite elements. Here's what that means in simple terms. A monkey can make a sound that means eagle above. A monkey can also make a sound that means snake below. But no monkey can combine these to say, I saw an eagle yesterday near the river where we found those berries last week. But don't worry. It flew north, so it's probably safe now, unless it comes back, in which case we should move the group further south. What do you think? That sentence, unremarkable to a human, requires grammar, syntax, tense, location, negation, conditional reasoning, and social coordination. It references the past, speculates about the future, and asks for an opinion. Every part of that is impossible without recursive language. Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist, argued that all human languages share a universal grammar, a deep structural framework hardwired into our brains. Whether you're speaking Hindi, Mandarin, Swahili, or Icelandic, your brain is using the same underlying machinery. This didn't evolve gradually. The evidence suggests it emerged suddenly, perhaps within the last 100,000 to 200,000 years, possibly due to a genetic mutation that rewired how our brains process symbolic information. The FOXP2 gene is part of this story. Often called the language gene, it's not that simple, but mutations in FOXP2 are linked to severe speech and language disorders. Humans have a version of FOXP2 that's distinct from chimpanzees and other primates. This gene affects how we control the fine motor movements needed for speech, and possibly how we process grammar itself. Language didn't just let us communicate. It let us accumulate knowledge across generations. A chimpanzee learns from direct experience and observation. A human learns from people who died thousands of years ago. Without language, each generation starts from zero. With language, each generation stands on the shoulders of every generation that came before. This compounding effect is why human progress accelerates while animal knowledge stays flat. This brings us to what may be the most underrated aspect of human intelligence: cumulative culture. Many animals have culture. Chimpanzee groups have different tool use traditions. Orcapods have different hunting techniques passed from mother to calf. Songbirds in different regions sing different dialects. These are cultural behaviors learned, not instinctual. But only humans have cumulative culture. We don't just pass knowledge down. We improve it. Each generation adds something. The wheel becomes the cart. The cart becomes the chariot. The chariot becomes the car. The car becomes the spaceship. A chimpanzee today uses tools almost exactly the way chimpanzees did 100,000 years ago. An orca hunts seals using techniques that haven't fundamentally changed in millennia. These are static cultures. They work so they don't change. Humans are incapable of leaving things alone. We tinker. We optimize. We see something that works and immediately think, how can this be better, faster, cheaper, stronger? This compulsion to improve is not rational in the short term. It often fails. But over thousands of generations, it produces spacecraft, antibiotics, the internet, and refrigerators. The psychologist Michael Tomasello calls this the ratchet effect. Human culture ratchets forward. It only moves in one direction. A bow and arrow never reverts back to a sharpened stick. Once an innovation spreads, it locks in and becomes the new foundation. Nothing else in nature does this. Here's a simple test. You show a child a box of crayons. You ask, what's inside? The child says crayons. You open the box. Surprise. It's actually full of buttons. You close the box. Then you bring in another person who wasn't in the room. You ask the child, what will this new person think is in the box? A 3-year-old will say buttons. Because the 3-year-old knows it's buttons. The 3-year-old can't separate what they know from what someone else knows. A 4-year-old will say crayons. Because the 4-year-old has just unlocked something extraordinary. Theory of mind. The understanding that other people have different knowledge, different beliefs, different perspectives, and those can be wrong. Chimpanzees show some rudimentary theory of mind. They understand what another chimp can see or not see. They'll hide food from dominant chimps who might steal it. But their ability is limited. They can't seem to understand false beliefs. They don't fully grasp that another individual might hold an incorrect understanding of the world. Humans do this instinctively. We don't just know things. We know that other people know different things. We know that other people might know things we don't know. We actively seek to fill those gaps. This ability is the foundation of teaching, lying, storytelling, acting, empathy, and every form of cooperation more complex than basic teamwork. Without theory of mind, you can hunt in a pack. With theory of mind, you can build a corporation. So the obvious next question, why us? Why not dolphins? Why not crows? Why not octopuses? They're all smart. They've all been around for millions of years. What stopped them? The answer isn't satisfying, but it's honest. A combination of physical constraints and a lack of evolutionary pressure. Dolphins have incredible brains, but they don't have hands. You cannot build technology without manipulating objects precisely. A dolphin can't create fire. A dolphin can't carve stone. A dolphin can't write things down. Intelligence without manipulation is intelligence trapped inside a body that can't act on it. Crows and parrots are brilliant problem solvers. They can use tools, solve multi-step puzzles, recognize human faces, and even understand the concept of zero. But their brains are tiny. A crow brain weighs about 10 grams. They achieve remarkable results with that hardware through extreme neural density and efficiency. But there's an upper limit to what can fit in a skull that also has to be light enough to fly. Evolution made a trade-off. Flight capability came at the cost of brain expansion. Octopuses are perhaps the closest thing to alien intelligence on Earth. Distributed brains with neurons in their arms as well as their heads. Problem-solving abilities that rival primates. The capacity for play, which is a marker of higher intelligence. But they live only a few years. An octopus mother dies shortly after her eggs hatch. There is no generational knowledge transfer. Every octopus starts from scratch. Brilliant but alone. Cumulative culture is impossible under these conditions. Then there's the evolutionary pressure problem. Intelligence is expensive. The human brain consumes massive energy. It makes childbirth dangerous due to head size. It requires a long, vulnerable childhood while the brain develops. For most species, this trade-off doesn't make evolutionary sense. A gazelle doesn't need to understand calculus. It needs to run fast. A crocodile has survived for 200 million years with a brain the size of a walnut. It works. Intelligence isn't the goal of evolution. Survival is. And for most niches, intelligence is unnecessary overhead. Humans ended up in a very specific set of circumstances. Changing climate in East Africa. Forests giving way to savanna. A species of ape forced out of the trees and into an environment where cooperation, tool use, and long-distance planning became survival requirements rather than optional extras. Cooking food provided more energy, which allowed bigger brains. Bigger brains allowed better cooperation and tool-making. Cooperation allowed food sharing and division of labor, which freed up even more energy for brains. The feedback loop was self-reinforcing. There's one last thing worth sitting with. A thought that's both humbling and slightly terrifying. In the entire 4.5 billion year history of this planet, across an estimated 8.7 million species currently alive and countless more extinct, exactly one lineage developed intelligence of this kind. Once. In all that time, in all those experiments, the universe is vast. The Milky Way alone has something like 100 to 400 billion stars. Most of those stars have planets. The math suggests life should be out there. Maybe even intelligent life. But maybe, just maybe, the gap between intelligent and technological civilization is wider than we think. Maybe dolphins are as smart as we are but locked in bodies that can't build telescopes. Maybe there were intelligent dinosaurs that rose and fell without leaving a trace because intelligence doesn't fossilize. Maybe the great filter of the Fermi paradox isn't ahead of us but behind us, and we pass through it by blind luck. We are the only species on this planet that looks up at the stars and asks what they are. The only species that digs into the ground to find bones of creatures that lived millions of years ago. The only species that writes poetry, that builds monuments to the dead, that sacrifices present comfort for a future it may not live to see. Other animals are intelligent. That's not the question anymore. Dogs understand human emotions. Elephants mourn their dead. Whales sing songs that evolve like pop music. Corvids hold grudges. Octopuses dream. But none of them are having this conversation. And that gap, that specific, strange, almost impossible gap, is what it means to be human.